What is the Joestar curse? Well, a lot of people think it's just a curse where Joestars die at a young age, as seen from Jonathan Joestar or George Joestar II, but I don't think so. I think it's the fact that in every generation of the Joestars, a tragedy is inevitable. And in this video, some of the biggest questions like, how did Joseph live so long? Why didn't Holly get affected by the curse? Or why was Jolene named Irene after the universal reset? And by the end, you'll have the best explanation from me for all these confusing questions. Also, I'll be telling you an extra theory I have on why this curse isn't only for the Joestars in the end. Alright, let's not waste any more time. Here's the explanation and my theories to the Joestar curse. Before we can even get to anything deep, we gotta understand what the Joestar curse actually is. From my experience in reading the JoJo wiki, I think the curse starts all the way back in 1868, when Dio's father, Dario Brando, saves George Joestar I from the carriage Jonathan was in. George would then want to repay the deed, which was what eventually led to Dio being able to move to the Joestar mansion. Dio would keep a strong hatred towards the Joestars, and his actions would be what later led to the creation of this generational curse. After that, the curse would immediately get to work, with Jonathan later dying on the burning ship. But from what I've seen, the curse isn't just people dying. It can also be a tragic event that happens, or a strong enemy that the Joestars will fight, like Joseph who had to fight cars, or Josuke who had to stand virus when he was small. I also have an extra theory on why this curse happens in the first place, but I'll talk about that later. Alright, now that you know what the curse is, let's start talking about the deeper parts of this curse. Okay, so we know that dying young isn't the only thing the curse is about, and with this, a question might immediately come to mind, and that is, how did Joseph live so long? Well, the answer might just be less complicated than you think. Like I said before, the curse can also be a tragic event or a strong enemy that the Joestar has to fight. And if we look at Joseph, he clearly had to fight an extremely strong enemy, cars. This guy was literally the ultimate life form, and you can't really say that he's not a strong enemy. Not to mention, Joseph also lost an arm in the process, which is a clear sign that the curse did affect Joseph. My theory is that surviving what the curse does to a Joestar is what breaks him free from it, and is probably why Joseph managed to live for such a long time. Speaking of escaping the curse, Holly Kujo, Jotaro's mother, is someone that a lot of people have questions for regarding the curse. And a big one is, why didn't Holly get the curse when she was young? Now, this is a very interesting question, but again, the answer is quite simple. As a child, Holly was never affected by anything. She lived a normal life from childhood to adulthood, but during part 3, when Dio was awakened again, every Joestar alive at the time were forced to manifest their stance, and Holly, being the kind-hearted and peaceful woman that she is, didn't have the fighting spirit other Joestars had to control her stand, and instead, the stand turned against her and tried to kill her, leading to the Crusaders having to travel to Egypt and fight Dio and everything. Now, you could say that the illness was part of the curse, but realistically, the illness was from the reawakening of Dio and not a direct effect from the curse itself. The real reason behind why Holly didn't experience anything from the curse as a child is from this one very specific pattern. Jonathan had Hamon, George Joestar II was an incredible fighter pilot, Joseph has Hamon and a stand, Jotaro, Josuke, and Jolene all have stands. Notice any patterns? Every Joestar who had a tragic event happen to them all had some sort of power, but Holly? She didn't have any powers. And something we can assume from this is that having a power is the activation of this curse. Just like how activating a stand needs some sort of canon event to happen, the Joestar curse requires having a power to be activated. And I don't think there really is a better reason for why Holly was never affected. And hey, if you have a better reason, please leave it in the comments. I would love to see it. But for now, let's keep it at that. Now, this is my favorite part. Why was Jolene suddenly named Irene after the universal reset? In the end of part 6, Pucci, using Made in Heaven, sped up time so much that the entire universe ended and restarted to create a new universe where everyone's fate was predetermined, creating the perfect world. But before his plan was complete, he was stopped by Emporio, who killed him with Weather Report. Pucci's death made his new universe unstable, which did collapse shortly after, and that triggered a second universal reset where Pucci never existed and no one ever had to fight him. With that, everyone's name was changed, which symbolized that they are no longer who they were in the previous universe, and that they are also free from the tragedies that they had to experience. And Jolene becoming Irene might be Araki's way of saying she's not living as a JoJo who's forced to save the world anymore. But although Araki never actually confirmed that these universal resets are what broke this curse, we can definitely assume that Irene herself, because she doesn't have that JoJo in her name anymore, and also from how she's not in prison and she's actually living a happy life, that she's freed from the fate that all Joestars had. Now, what I mean by this is literally called the Joestar curse and not like the curse that affects everyone. Well, if you take a closer look, just by being near a Joestar could infect you with the curse. I'm gonna name a couple people, and you tell me a pattern that you see. Will Zappelli, Caesar Zappelli, Kakyoin, Polnareff, Foo Fighters, and Weather Report. Notice anything? Yeah, they're all Joe Bros who died. There were also JoBros who were deeply connected with the main JoJo as well. And my theory is that once you become deeply connected to JoJo, there's a good chance that the curse could spread to you, and you'll die, even if the Joestar themselves doesn't die. But there is one small exception, which is part 4. There were no deaths, aside from Shigechi and, the villain, but there were near-death experiences for Koichi and Okuyasu, who were the closest people to Josuke. What I think is that if you aren't directly involved with Dio, who started the curse, it will be a little more forgiving on you. Like, Josuke didn't even know who Dio was until Jotaro mentioned him, and not to mention, Josuke also has never seen Dio in his whole life. Thanks for watching this video's second ever video, and my first ever solo video. This video covered some of the biggest questions regarding the curse that a lot of people have, but it's not all of them. Also, thank you all for 200 subscribers. I never thought that we would get here this quickly. Maybe we'll hit 500 subscribers or maybe even 1,000 soon. And remember, this video is just a theory. A JoJo theory. Goodbye.